Thank you for listening to Conversations with Alison J, The Journey to Here. Please remember to subscribe, hit the like button, and share.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Conversations with Alison J, The Journey to Here. I'm your host, Alison J. Today I welcome Heather Shurina. Heather is a wife, a mother, a business owner, but Heather's story is incredibly remarkable. She talks to us today about her struggles with infertility. She has gone through IVF, IUI treatments, and she shares today her incredible journey on Conversations with Alison J, The Journey to Here. Welcome, Heather. So, Heather, thank you so much for joining me and wanting to talk about your journey with infertility. And when I was at the hairdressers today, because like I mentioned to you, I've recently moved states. And this is a woman that I had been to when visiting here like 2 years ago. I hadn't seen her in over 2 years. So we were just catching up on what are you up to, what are you doing, and all the rest of it. And so I was telling her about the new project, the podcast, and I was telling her about the conversation you and I were scheduled to have today. And she said to me, yeah, that's interesting. So I'm looking at her like, okay, she's going to elaborate any minute now. Yeah, I was married for 20 years and didn't have children. So sometimes I'm thinking, okay, where is this going to go? Because there's some women, they don't have children because they don't want. And there's other women that don't have children because guess what? They can't. People tend to almost treat people that can't have children a little bit like a pariah.
Yeah.
and all the attention is on those that can have children, and then those of us that have struggled, it's not spoken about. So for example, like when I had 3 miscarriages, and I don't, apart from my mum, I don't know anybody that I could have spoken to that also had that. And not only that, but people that I know that have lost children, it was a case of you don't know what to say because you don't want to open old wounds for them. And when I was talking to the hairdresser today, and I was saying to her that I had 3 miscarriages and then I had to have a hysterectomy. So she asked me, so what about any support groups? Were there any support groups? And I was like, no. She said the hospital didn't recommend anything. No. I just realized I've got the AC humming in my back. So sorry about that. And it's just one of those. So when I read your article, it was like a breath of fresh air and a bit of a sigh of relief to know that there are other women that have gone through this and are prepared to share and speak about it, so that there are those women that don't know where to turn, have somebody else's journey that they can identify with. So please, Heather, please introduce yourself, because I know that you're a wife, you're a mother now, you are a businesswoman as well. So Heather, please introduce yourself. Tell us who you are.
So my name's Heather Shurina. I live in Pittsburgh, and it's funny, all of this started, having children was never on my radar, ever. So the idea of, I have an infertility blog and adjusting to motherhood now that I'm a mom, especially after going through infertility treatments. That was never part of my plan. When I met my husband, that changed pretty quickly. I all of a sudden wanted to have a family with him. I'm like, oh, okay, I actually want to get married and have kids, I think. So when we first got married, we opened a barbershop together. And that was kind of our baby, like right in the beginning. And we just thought, I'll just stop taking the pill. We're married. It's going to happen.
Right.
Like 6 months, a year and a half. I'm like, yeah, this is kind of strange. So, catapult me into 4 years later, and we're doing in vitro. I mean, if you would have told me that 8 years ago, I would have never believed you. So, and I had the same situation where I didn't know where to turn. I didn't know who to talk to about it. Majority of my friends were getting married and having kids naturally. I think it made people uncomfortable around me because they felt bad and they were afraid to share pregnancy announcements and afraid to invite me to baby showers. And I should have just opened up the conversation, but I didn't know how, you know? When we went through years of treatment, we did hormones and timed intercourse and IUIs. And then our first failed cycle of IVF, I needed to get it out. And I was going to therapy through all of it, but I just needed to put it somewhere. So I started my infertility blog more like in the sense of, if I put this out there for myself, I didn't even know if I would ever put it online. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And the response, the amount of women who had gone through things, had gone through infertility, miscarriages, never being able to get pregnant. It was like overwhelming. And to think that it's not just, a normal conversation, all of a sudden I'm like, oh my gosh, we need to talk about this.
Yeah. Wow.
So.
And what you were saying about, because you just don't think that it's something you're going to ever struggle with, because as far as you're concerned, because I was in a very similar position, because I had spent many years on the pill, but then when I got married, before I got married, I actually had to come off the pill because I developed a blood clot in my leg when I was traveling.
Oh, wow.
So it's just like, okay, so I came off the pill and I had tried all the progesterone only, the injection, the coil, none of that worked for me. So when I got married, it was just a case of, well, there's nothing to stop, so it's going to happen.
Exactly.
And so I remember the first miscarriage, it's just like, okay, still nothing to worry about. And then I remember speaking to a girlfriend of mine, and she saying, no, you need to demand a laparoscopy. So when I went to my doctor, and he's like, well, why do you want that? And I says, well, because I'm fed up of my periods landing me in the hospital, because it was a case of what a doctor actually said to me. He says, your periods are like you're in labor every month. And because the pain was that bad, and it's like I'm miscarrying and hemorrhaging every month because the cycle was so heavy. They says what you are experiencing is flooding. So it's like, that's interesting. Okay, so I had the laparoscopy, and they diagnosed a condition called adenomyosis.
Okay.
Never heard of it before. I'd heard of endometriosis.
Right.
Never heard of this one. So I was just like, well, what the hell is that? Fix it.
Yeah, right. Okay.
He says, we can't. He says, one of two things is going to have to happen. You're going to either have to have a hysterectomy or just learn to live with it. That was what my doctor told me.
Those were your options.
Those are my only two options. Have a hysterectomy or just learn to live with it. And I just thought, you know what? Suck it up, buttercup. Because you want, you're married, newlywed, you want to have a baby and so on. So, to your point about you just thought you could do that, I was thinking to myself, in my mind, and because of things that I've heard other people say, it was the one thing you're supposed to be able to do as a woman, you can't do.
You feel like your body's failing you. How exactly? Yeah.
So I didn't have the hysterectomy because I was just like, well, no.
And what a huge decision here are your options.
Yeah.
Here's what you have. Here are your options. Go ahead and think about it. I mean,
and
it's a lot.
So I started to research it. I looked into it for myself because they didn't actually tell me what it meant. So I looked into it and I tried alternative medicines. I tried needles, acupuncture.
Did a lot of that too.
Listen, you know what? There's a lot of people that are afraid of needles, and I've encouraged them to have acupuncture. So me saying needles, that's really not helping.
I know, and acupuncture it's fantastic for sure.
No, absolutely, and it really did help me. And so, and then like you said, other people, they don't want to share their news, and then so you start to feel excluded. I mean, how was that for you?
It's similar. I think it is isolating. And the deeper I got into it, it did start to bother me when I'm like, I'm happy for my friends. I'm happy for my family. But at the same time, it's like a little, it gets you a little bit. So then you kind of start to feel guilt too. And then how do you say out loud, hey, I really, like, who do you tell? I love my best friend and I'm so happy she's on her 3rd pregnancy. This is fantastic for her, but I can't handle it right now. Who do you say that to without feeling selfish and guilty for feeling like that, let alone saying it out loud,
And you're probably thinking, you're being self-centered. Am I really a true friend?
Like, it's the hormones. That has to be just the hormones I'm on, But it's a real feeling, and it's okay to not be okay for a little bit.
Yeah. And you mentioned that you were in therapy the whole time, because that's one thing that I think people think, well, that's not something I can go to therapy about.
Oh, sure is. Sure. I mean, therapy has gotten me through a lot. You can go to therapy for anything.
Right.
And if you don't think you have issues, like, there were times that I'd be like, I have nothing to talk about. Oh, no. There's something to talk about every time.
Wow.
So that was huge, processing it with somebody else and being married. And, because everything was happening to me, my husband's trying to be a support system, but every failed attempt, he was mourning it too, but probably didn't feel like he had the space to do it because it was my body.
Right. Yeah. So tell me, what was that like for him?
It was hard. It worked out a few years into it. I held on to a couple contacts, and there was a woman who lived in Florida who I had never met, and then a family friend who was removed enough that I felt very comfortable talking to because they had gone through it. The one woman's husband is a therapist, and he had gone through infertility. So he was my husband's go-to person. And I think that helped him a lot. Because men are often taught to keep things in and be strong, and you can't cry and you can't, show emotion. And that's just going to, that will just eat away at somebody.
Yeah. And it's interesting that you mentioned that your husband went through it with you, because he was mourning every loss, because we don't think about the man because it's not a selfish thing per se, because it's a case of, well, you did your bit, so you're okay.
Yes.
You got me pregnant, so you're okay. This me, I feel like I'm letting you down.
Exactly. Especially when in my case, and what you went through, it's your physical issue. You know what I mean? Because a lot of times in infertility, it's, it falls on the man in the relationship. And I can only imagine how that is. I'm sure that's incredibly difficult as well. And I'm sure, my husband oftentimes said, I feel very helpless. I don't know what to do for you. Him saying that, though, was helpful to say, like, I'm here. I don't know what to do for you. And then we go through it, and I realize, oh my goodness, you're going through this too. So my body's physically in pain, or, I'm coming down from hormones, and I'm frustrated and upset with my body for not doing what it's supposed to do as a woman. But you're in this too. You're my partner, and you're trying to make this work with me. But it took a while. And I think in the beginning, when he would be so disappointed, I couldn't handle it. So I almost pulled away a little bit.
That's interesting.
And then through therapy, through processing, I realized I do have to give him his space to be sad about it too. So even if I'm like, okay, I'm disappointed, but I can't handle anything else right now, it's not fair for me to shut out his feelings either.
Right.
So it's all part of the process. And things that nobody talks about.
Exactly, because it's, interestingly enough, when going through it, I didn't speak. I mean, I'm now being divorced, but I didn't speak to my first husband about it. And especially because he has a son from a previous relationship, so I know he can do his bit.
So you're like, I know that this is all on me.
Yeah. So when I went through, I remember it was funny. I remember when the first one. And it was, I felt so weak and exhausted.
I'm sure.
and I didn't say anything. I was literally like that person that just puts the mask on and like almost like a performing seal. Because when I was by myself, I was like, oh.
Yep.
And then the moment it's like, okay, I have to.
We're fine. We're good. We're all good.
And just like on stage to just conduct my performance, and then can't wait for either everybody to leave or to be able to get back home, so I could just literally just go back into myself. Yes,
I know exactly what you mean. It's so true, because you also want to keep everybody around you comfortable.
Exactly.
You know?
Yeah.
I remember, I think it was our last attempt at IUI, which is I'm going to mess this up, intrauterine insemination. I was in a wedding, and we were getting our results the morning of that wedding. So it was like Friday morning, and the rehearsal was that night. And they called to let me know it was negative at like 2:00, and I had to be at the church at 3. And my husband was at work, and we had to just meet at the rehearsal dinner and smile. And it just so happened another bridesmaid in the wedding announced she was pregnant at the rehearsal dinner. And it was the first time that I physically got up and just had to walk out, because I was like, I can't hide this. There was so much going on.
Yeah.
I can't. Yeah. But then, I cried, and then I went back in and I smiled again,
And the thing is, you can't do, especially that situation. You're at a wedding, for goodness sake. Everybody's happy and over the moon.
It's not about me and my uterus.
Right. And and then there's other ones like happy and joyous because now there's baby news on top of it.
Yeah.
And my call this morning was, you really have to just, you know what, get that. It's like, I've got my lip gloss here. You literally just have to get it. Just like, you know what, I'm going to paint it on it.
Reapply. We're good.
Yeah, it's completely, totally. And it's just like, I mean, mentally being in that space, and especially because it's the rehearsal dinner, the night, and then obviously maybe the wedding, the
next day.
I mean, mentally, how did you literally do that? And I can bet you probably put on the performance of your life.
Basically, I just pushed it back in the back of my mind and just kept moving forward. And we ended up going on a family trip, like with my entire side of our family, the following day. When we got back, we were gone, we did like a cross country thing. I think it was like 10 days. When we got home, it caught up to me. And then all of a sudden you just have nothing left. Like, you can run from it and you can keep putting on a performance, and you can, smile and have your champagne and go on a trip and everything's fine, but it doesn't go anywhere until you deal with it.
Wow.
So when we got back, it was like a fallout of everything. And I just kind of broke down, So, and my husband kept saying, how are you feeling? What's going on? And I'd be like, I'm fine, which never means you're fine. If you say I'm fine, you're not fine.
Opposite. Because the fact that you have to ask, the fact that you even have to ask, and that's so strange about us as people. The reason that question is asked is they can obviously see, sense, feel something is going on. So then to get that, I'm fine. It's like, yeah, okay, you told yourself that because I didn't buy it, but okay then.
Right. There's a reason I'm asking the question.
Right? Yeah. And especially because so you literally had almost like 2 solid weeks of not being able to feel what you were feeling.
Yes. And on top of it, every cycle, what really got me was progesterone that we would do injections. So once we did, IVF or IUI, we would do injections of progesterone, which is, it just imagine like, so when you talk about acupuncture, how you want to move energy and you want to get rid of the heat, it just creates this heat inside of you. And then once you stop, it plummets. So on top of all of the emotional side effects, just like with a miscarriage, your hormones drop, they plummet. So there are things going on with you that you can't control at all either, so you add that on top of it and it's like a perfect storm,
Because, you saying that when you got back home and it all caught up to you, I remember a friend of mine she recommended this book to me called Feelings Buried Alive Never Die.
Wow, that title right there.
Right.
Right.
And it's with going through all the everything. That's what I can call it. Just going through the everything. And I, especially when you are notorious for being that everybody comes to you. Because for as long as I can remember, and I don't even know how it started, I've always been the go-to. But then that built up to a place of, so who do I go to? And then I tried it once and they didn't know what to do with it and they couldn't handle it. Just like, okay. So that makes you kind of pull into yourself even more.
Right. So if you finally are vulnerable, the vulnerable one, and you're not met with what you were expecting, it makes you be like, okay, never mind. I can't share this.
Exactly. And then the more that happens is the less you share.
And then you just shut down. You just start closing off.
Yeah. So
yeah.
So after the rehearsal dinner and the wedding and then the family trip and you broke down, Heather, what happened? How did you get through that?
I have a great therapist. My husband is extremely supportive, and he and I are the reason that we're able to work together and, have a business together that's open 7 days a week, go through infertility, all of that stuff together, is because we like to, once something happens, let's process it and let's see what our next thing is. So he was like, okay, that was the 4th failed IUI. Is it time to start talking about in vitro? How are you feeling about it? Let's just make the appointment. Let's talk about it. So it almost gave me like a sense of, okay, none of this has been working, but now we have something else to look forward to. Okay. So, but we did take a break. I think that was in August. I think I didn't do hormones again until December. I think he and I both decided, let's stop for a second, take a breather. But when you're trying to get pregnant,
yeah,
everyone's like, well, once you relax and you just go on vacation, you'll get pregnant. So in your mind, you're like, I'm not even thinking about it, but I'm probably pregnant right now. And you're not, So when you're in the process of it, there's really no forgetting about it. But we attempted to do that for a little bit.
Okay. So just for our listeners, the IUI and IVF.
Okay.
So I think I know in my head what the difference is, but you tell us, because you have actually been through both.
Okay, so IUI is when they collect a sample from, so my husband would go and they would do a wash and get the best sperm that he had. Let me rewind. You usually start with a hormone, like I would do Clomid, and it would increase your egg production. You go in every few days, you do an ultrasound and see how many follicles you have, which contain mature eggs. So they look and see, okay, this is a good amount. Then you go home. So say they call, okay, great. You have 8 mature follicles in your right ovary and 7 in the other. Perfect timing. You go home that night, you do an injection shot, which holds, it keeps you from ovulating, and it has you ovulate an exact amount. I want to say it's a day and a half, somewhere around there, or maybe it's 2 days. It's crazy that I don't remember this, but say it's 48 hours. I think it might be 32 hours. You go in so they tell you do it at 10 p.m. one night, and then you'll come in maybe 10 p.m. or 10 a.m. 2 days later. Michael would go in the morning, give his sample. They would do a wash, get the best sperm. And then I would go in and they actually take a catheter and they put in his best sperm at the exact time that you're ovulating. And they insert it into the uterus and it goes up into the fallopian tubes. Okay. So that's IUI. And I think that the percentage of that working isn't much higher than just trying to conceive naturally. It helps. I think it helps if, say, if the man in the relationship is having infertility struggles, say that the mobility of the sperm isn't that great. Right. That's a great way to do it. But it's a good starting point. And they did say, it might take a few times. So after doing that a few times, then we did some timed intercourse with hormones, very similar situation. You just do it at home. And then in vitro is where actually you do stimulating hormones. You grow as many great mature follicles as you possibly can. They put you in a twilight. they go in with a catheter and a needle, and they take out all of these eggs. In the meantime, your husband or partner gives their sample, get all the best sperm, and then they put them together and physically make the embryos outside of the body. And then they wait and see how they're doing, if they're thriving, and they plan a transfer date where they actually take one of those or two of those embryos and insert them into your uterus. So it's a little more aggressive.
Right. So that's probably why the number of multiple births during IVF is so high then.
Yes.
God. Okay. That's interesting.
Mm-hmm.
The IUIs, I didn't realize. I literally just thought it was obviously before speaking to you and looking it up, but I just, for the benefit of the listeners who probably have the same idea as me, it's like you just take the sperm and you inject it into the
like a turkey baster.
Right, and then that's it. And it's actually quite funny because as you say that, for all my listeners in the UK over a certain age, there was there was a soap opera that we used to watch, and that's how a woman got pregnant for this guy. She was besotted with this guy. Mm-hmm. And that's how she got pregnant for him.
With the turkey baster.
Yeah. So that was actually a bit of a joke in the UK at the time, like turkey basters and stuff. So as you said that, it's like, wow. But so and that's actually how they made it seem, though. It's as easy as that. Just get a turkey baster.
And basically this is it, but just a little, more high tech.
Actually, that is very interesting. It's conjuring up all sorts of images in my mind now.
Right?
So, okay. I never look at a turkey baster the same ever again.
I know. I'm so sorry.
But that is interesting. And when you look at it and when you think about it, so the toll that takes on your body and your mind. So speak to us about that, because with IVF, you have to give yourself shots. So is it on a daily basis?
So they'll do, it depends. So everything's so timed. It's another interesting thing with work, especially being in the barbering industry. Talk about men being extremely uncomfortable. I had to tell our barbers, like, hey guys, we're going to do in vitro. And they were all just like, please don't tell us about it. But I'm like, you just have to know, because Michael will have to call off at last minute. We just share it with a few of our clients, because you get a phone call and all of a sudden he has to give me a shot, or we have to go to, the hospital. You just have to do it because it's so time sensitive. But it's really interesting. The oral hormones I did with IUI, Clomid especially, that was more of a struggle than the injections for in vitro. The Clomid is something else. It made me like an animal. Hot flashes and sweating and angry, and it was wild. So physically, I want to say the injections, obviously that's not fun. That was a little harder, but emotionally it wasn't as bad. But you do, so say, I think my first cycle, so our first attempt at in vitro was failed. So, which was another thing, like in my mind, we're going to start in vitro. This is it. It won't fail. So I want to say it was like a 10-day period. There's a shot in the morning and a shot at night. You're going in for ultrasounds to see how everything's looking. And then you introduce a third shot that keeps you from ovulating. And then you add the fourth shot that tells you when to ovulate. By that point, you're a little overloaded. Your abdomen is bruised. You're swollen. Your ovaries get big. They have you, I was drinking Gatorade like crazy because I was just so swollen, and it is wild what your body goes through. And then you go in for the retrieval, and they take the eggs, and you feel like 1,000 times lighter after that. And the retrieval process itself is nothing. It's not painful. There's a little bit of cramping. That's not bad at all. And then you're waiting. You wait for them to call and tell you, did any of your embryos take? And with our first round, there's something called ICSI, and that's when they take a needle and they actually inject one sperm into your egg. And then there's a natural way of doing it where they pour it over top and they allow the best sperm to get in. So I think I had like 20 great eggs, and we're like, oh, this is amazing. And they called me the next day and they said, 0 of the ones that we did naturally worked, and only 3 worked with ICSI. So we ended up transferring 2 embryos the following day, and they didn't take neither one. So my mind was like, you know, that to me, that was it. Like, we would be pregnant that time. That was, and then on top of it, you're doing the progesterone shots again, and those go in like your lower back, like top of your bum. It's really fun. And that lasts, if you do get pregnant, that lasts your first trimester. You do them every day. So when that failed,
Wow.
we were like, I was just this blob of like hormonal acne and bruised.
And you must have looked like a pincushion.
I looked like a pincushion, 100%. And I looked pregnant because I was so swollen, and my abdomen was so big and nothing was fitting. But no, you know, no baby.
That must have just affected, like, because, you know, the hormonal changes, your mood and everything. But yeah, because you're in the people business, being a barber, you have to put that face on and just keep on trucking, as they say.
I think that was like one of the first times that our manager of our shop is one of my best childhood friends, which works out, obviously, that I said, I can't come in. And I just took a day. And then, you know, you go back and forth on like how much time you should take to process something, or do you go back in and you just keep moving so they're not sitting in it, you know?
Yeah.
But
and I suppose for that, in that instance, is what works best for you. And to be honest, I think everybody should actually take an element of both, though. You don't want to just go straight back into it and not, and not having dealt with it, because you do need to deal with it. But then you don't want to stay in that place too long. And I remember my first proper job once I left school was in a bank, and there was this woman there, and she was, and you know, things are so different now. She was on the payroll, and she had lost a baby. And I don't know if she actually gave birth, but she had gone far in her pregnancy. And I was at the bank, I think I was there for almost 2 years. That woman only came into work every 6 months or so, just to speak to the manager. And I'm just thinking, and I remember at the time, because I was only 18 at the time, and I remember thinking to myself, hold on a second, but it's been 2 years.
yeah.
Are you not doing anything to get yourself out of this space? Are you still gonna be mourning this? And I wasn't trying to be insensitive, but it was a case of, but you literally are behaving like life has stopped.
And you can't.
Because you had a miscarriage. And it's like, you've stopped trying. Try again. And I just wanted to shake and say, try again.
Yes.
Come back to life. Try again. What happened to you is horrible. It's unpleasant. And obviously at the time, I would have had no idea what that was or felt like. But I'm thinking, try again. Don't give up. And everybody was just like, oh, there.
Yeah.
No, somebody should tell her, stop it.
Someone needs to say, wake up. Yeah.
Yeah. And to my point, that's why I'm thinking everybody should have an element of both. Because absolutely, should she have gone through that and grieved? Yes. But there should always be that, also be the other side of it. It's like, you know what? I can't stay in this place forever.
Exactly.
I'm not going to bury myself in this grief forever. There's a whole world out there that still needs to be lived. And to be honest, as much as I don't have any children, do you know how many children I have?
Right.
You know, it's strange, the number of children that I didn't even think viewed me like that. I'm Auntie Alison to so many, and I'm hearing it, and I'm just like, okay, I'll take it. And I know it's not the same. Absolutely, I know it's not the same, and you know, you can't substitute it for motherhood, but you can still be that person to others, and you can still celebrate that. Yeah, and that's what I wanted to tell her, but I never got the chance. And honestly, for 2 years, and I don't even know and when I started, she was already out on this a special kind of leave. But for the 2 years that I was there, I only ever saw her every 6 months when she just came to check in to say, oh no, I'm still not feeling better. And it's just like, okay, this to me is a little bit bizarre, because you literally have pressed the pause button on life.
And you have to have a purpose other than whatever it is that you're going through that has failed. There is something else, like being an aunt to so many kids. That's so important. I mean, that's such a huge role. It's just different. And it may not be what we want, you know, or the way we saw things happening.
Absolutely.
But, you know, you have to keep going. You have to, you know?
Yeah. And for, to a certain extent, years later, when I would experience miscarriage and so on, I would know what that felt like. But I couldn't, the first one, like it was difficult. The second one to me was the hardest.
I'm sure.
The third one to me was the hardest. Third and last. And it was just one of those things where it's like, what in the world is happening? And I didn't give myself the luxury of time to process it. And then going on, and then there started to be like, and then shortly after that, there was the breakdown of my marriage, going through the divorce. And then I was having health challenges because of the adenomyosis. And yeah, because I ended up having to have 2 blood transfusions.
You lost that much blood?
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh, you poor thing.
And it was one of those things where I had no idea what was wrong with me. And because I didn't know what was wrong with me, I was just constantly pushing and going and pushing.
Yes.
And then eventually, when I thought, I went to the doctors and I said, I think I'm going to need a referral to a cardiologist. And he looked at me like, why? And I says, because I can't do anything without my heart racing and I'm out of breath. And he looked at me, you know, you've got these, he's my former doctor and this older Nigerian man. So no tact or diplomacy, none. And he's like, cardiologist? You're not going to need a cardiologist. If you keep going like this, you're going to need a mortician.
No.
I'm thinking, mortician. And in my head, I'm thinking, hold on. Because a mortician deals with dead people, right?
Right.
So he's like, and then he says, no, you're pale. Look at you. Look at your lips. Your lips are pale. Look at your lips. And I'm like, okay. So he says, your blood count's probably about 7. So I'm like, oh, okay. What's it supposed to be?
Yeah.
Exactly. I'm like, he says about 14 or 15. I'm like, oh. My answer at the time, everything was, oh, okay. And
you're taking it in.
Yeah. So then that was the Monday. He took my bloods and everything. He says, call me Wednesday. Called Wednesday and he wasn't there. He called me the Thursday and he's like, okay, I need you to get to the hospital right now. So I'm like, this time I'm at work. I'm like, okay. And then he says, what did I say your blood count was? I said 7. I'm like, why? What is it? He says it's 4.8. Like,
oh.
So I'm like, oh, okay. So I went, and at the time, the job I was in, I reported directly to the CEO. He wasn't there, so I went to the CFO. And the CFO starts like, okay, we need to get you into an Uber. And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, I drove to work this morning. I can drive to the
You're just so used to being so strong and going and going.
And the hospital was like 3 blocks from where my mother lived. So I was just like, I'm just going to drive there. And they're like, no, we can't. So everybody's flapping around. I'm like, oh, for goodness sake, calm down. Like, everybody just be still.
Yeah.
So got to so they wouldn't let, then he's thinking, what am I thinking? Making you get an Uber in this condition? I'm like, what condition? So he's like, no, you know what? We're going to get somebody to drive you. So the person drove me. Then later on that day, 2 young ladies brought my car to my mom's. I'm just like, for goodness sake, this is so dramatic. Anyway, got to the hospital. By the time, they do the triage thing. I just went in and I gave my name. The woman wrote it on a piece of paper. She hadn't finished writing before I was round the back.
Get out of here.
My doctor had
for you.
He had called ahead.
So they says, okay, well, on Monday it was 4.8, but it's Thursday today, anything could happen. So they took it again on Thursday, it dropped even lower. It was now 4.1.
Oh.
And one of the nurses, she was just freaking out a little bit. She says, I've only ever seen numbers like this in a textbook. That's what she said. She says, by rights, you're supposed to be in a coma, hooked up to 4 machines going into organ failure.
And you're trying to drag yourself.
So, but you know what my answer to that was? Okay.
You're okay.
Okay. So I'm there
at me.
And they got the blood so quickly. I was still in the ER having the blood transfusion. That's how quickly they just like, no, we don't have time to. So that's basically what was going on for me. And then like 10 months later, I was right back to square one, had been sent to have another blood transfusion and so on. And it was after the second one, I just realized I'm literally dying to have a baby. Literally. And that's when I had that epiphany, aha moment, light bulb, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. But that's when it's like, I'm literally dying to have a baby. And that's when I thought, I can't keep doing this. Mm-mm. I can't. And so that was the March. The very next month I was in hospital having a hysterectomy.
Have you been well since your hysterectomy?
Absolutely. I've gained so much weight, it's been ridiculous. It's just like, who, people that have known me my whole life are just like, okay. Because I've always been tiny, and it's not like I've gained that much weight.
Right.
But compared to what I was, because obviously I wasn't being depleted, because my cycle clockwork every 21 days. And it was not only was I losing that much blood, for the first 2 days, I was being violently sick. So I couldn't, not even water would stay down. So I couldn't take any pain meds, and I couldn't eat anything, couldn't drink anything. So that's what it was like without fail.
Every 21 days.
Out like clockwork. Mm. So then I went to, just before I had the hysterectomy, I went and they wanted to do all kinds of other tests. So they did one where they measure your uterus. Mm-hmm. I remember, and I went back to my doctor, because by this time I changed doctors, because that one that says either have a hysterectomy or learn to live with it, I'm just like, later to you.
Right.
Dude, deuces. So speak to another one. And he was giving me the measurements of my uterus. So I'm writing it down. And then I'm like, okay, thank you. Then it's like, Alison, what is it supposed to be? You know what yours is? When he gave me the measurements of a normal uterus, because they measure in 3 different points, mm-hmm. Every one of mine was more than 3 times larger than the size of a normal uterus.
Oh my goodness.
That's why I was having the miscarriages, because my uterus was like just mush, like sponge. So it couldn't hold.
The lining was probably just.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it was just like.
Wow.
This is interesting. So then it was like just a few weeks after that I was actually in hospital having the hysterectomy, and the surgery ended up taking longer than scheduled because they couldn't get my uterus out. It was so big.
Oh my gosh.
Because normally they take your uterus out vaginally, but mine was so big. It was so enlarged that, and so it was just like, I can't keep doing it. I
physically couldn't do it. Your body said no.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. And it was one of those things where, and then I didn't deal with that either. So I didn't deal with the miscarriages. I didn't deal with the health issues, because literally I was just like straight back to work, and
you didn't have time, especially when people are, here's what you have to do, here are your numbers, here's this.
Right.
You're just doing what they're.
Yeah, there was no time to process it. Mm-hmm. And that was in 2017. I had that. Fast forward to 2019, other life challenges happened. Literally, I was speaking to a psychotherapist, mm-hmm. and he just happened to be a friend of mine. So it's not even like I didn't even give myself the luxury of seeing one on a professional basis. Mm-hmm. And he said, he's like this guy with this deep, deep, almost Barry White-esque voice. And all I remember is like him saying, sis, you're on the brink of a psychotic break. Calm down, slow down. And that's what it took for me to be just like pull up and say, okay, I have to deal with this.
I have to
deal. But yet still there was no one to go through it with me, in the sense of who do I talk to, sharing experiences.
Right.
So I really wish I had read your blog, like, and your article 3 years ago. It's like, I needed you 3 years ago, Heather.
But that's what's so wild, is that I didn't even start writing this until after my failed IVF. So same thing, like it's years. And then once I put that out there, and the amount of women who are like, oh, me too, I went through this. And it's like the same thing. Instead of, because you don't know where to go. And you're right, it is one thing to talk to a therapist. It's something different when there's a community where you can say, we've been through similar situations. We know what this feels like. When you're going through that and you don't know where to put it, you're right. You just stay busy, or you go into the next thing, or the next attempt to get pregnant, or whatever it is. And eventually it catches up to you.
Yeah.
And you're like, I have to deal with it.
Yeah.
All of it.
Yeah. I threw myself into work and projects, helping people and helping other people with their projects and being there for this one and that one. And I just completely threw myself into everything but myself.
I remember having a therapy session, and my therapist asked me the happiest I ever was. I was like, I would say when I was working full-time for an event planning company and bartending at night. And she was like, why do you think that is? I said, I don't know. I just like being busy. She was like, right, because you don't have to deal with anything real. You can just, you don't have time for it. You don't have time for it. So you just fill your life with being nonstop, and then you don't ever have to stop and deal with any of it. And I was like, sounds about right.
But it's amazing. Look how simple that is, but yet it had to take somebody else to tell you.
When you're in it, you can't even see it. You're just on this hamster wheel, you know?
That is so interesting. So after you had your failed attempt at IVF, what happened then?
So
I'm trying not to give any spoilers.
No, so we then of course, so I have a breakdown, and let's talk about the financials of it. None of it's cheap, and none of it's covered by insurance. So we were like, how are we going to do this? And it was one of those things where I'm like, I took a day off work, and I'm like, I need to figure something out. So I started looking things up, and here there's this, it's called ARC Fertility, and they basically give you loans for infertility treatments. And here I'm like, how did I not know about this,
The first time hearing of it.
And I'm 3 years in at this point. And I called them, and the woman I talked to, I told her what happened, and I just spilled everything out that had just happened to a stranger on the phone. And she was like, I get calls like this all the time. Wow. We're going to help you. Let's set this up. And she just walked me through it, and I felt hope again. And my husband and I decided together that this was the last thing we were going to do. If this wasn't going to work, it was time to move on to something else, So this time around, my expectation was a little lower, because I was so used to failed attempts at everything that I think it almost weirdly took pressure off of it. I don't know. But they also learned through my failed attempt, apparently I have a hard shell around my eggs, which I didn't even realize we had shells around our eggs. So any sperm that tried to penetrate my egg couldn't get in. So I would have never gotten pregnant. The ones that they took the needle and they injected got in.
Yes, yeah.
But they couldn't get back out, because they have to actually hatch when they embed in your uterine lining, which 3 years in, I was like, had no idea that happened,
Heather.
So there was something called assisted hatching, where they actually take a laser and they just open it up a little bit. So they learned through all of that, let's try this. So we went through a whole cycle again, ended up with 9 embryos.
Mm-hmm.
They said, we're just going to do 1. I'm like, no, we have to do 2, because I did 2 last time and they didn't work. And this guy's like, this doctor was like, just trust me. And they did assisted hatching. I mean, and it worked. So I got pregnant with my daughter, Mickey, and then the rest of them continued to thrive, and they basically put them on ice. They froze the rest of them.
Wow. I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to ask you if it was diagnosed as to what was causing you to not be able to get pregnant and stay pregnant.
Mm-hmm. And it was unexplained infertility, which is so common. So to have an answer at the end of it was like, oh my goodness. If I wouldn't have gone on that journey, and if I wouldn't have decided to do in vitro,
Mm-hmm.
I would have never known, you know?
That's the thing that I'm finding a bit frustrating with the medical field, the medical profession,
Mm-hmm.
because my friend told me to demand a laparoscopy. I would have never thought of it. I'm not a doctor, for goodness sake. I don't know medical terms. I don't know what a laparoscopy is or was.
Right.
I just went to him, like, look, she told me. So I didn't.
When you're going to a professional, trusting them.
Yeah. And I remember, even when I was living in the UK, because I think I started my periods at 11.
Mm-hmm.
And from as long as I can remember, they were horrendous.
Oh.
And I go into year after year after year, going to doctor after doctor, specialist after specialist. And I remember, like, all my listeners in the UK will know Harley Street.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Harley Street is the place where you have all those doctors where the superstars go to, because that's where you spend a small fortune to go and see a private doctor.
Gotcha.
So that's Harley Street. And I remember counting all my little shekels, because I was going to see a specialist.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing that they thought could have explained what was happening to me is fibroids, but they never found fibroids. So nobody would look any deeper to see what was going on with me. It's it's not fibroids, we don't know. And that's literally, I had that from I was going to the doctors from I was in my early teens about this, right through to I was in my 40s.
And no ever.
And it was only because I asked for a laparoscopy. So when the doctor says, what do you want that for? At first, in my head, I'm thinking, listen,
I'm asking for it.
And not only that, this isn't in the UK where it's the National Health Service, so it's a strain on resources. I'm in the US, so that means I'm paying. I have insurance. It's not like I was asking for anything for free. My insurance covers this, and my copay, I'll pay it. So why are you even bothering to give me the thing?
Exactly. And you have to be your own advocate. You don't know to do that until you're in a position where you have to do it, or someone tells you to do it.
Exactly. And I'm just thinking to myself, so hold on a second. You had to go through. So nobody actually stopped to say, hold on a second. She's trying to get pregnant. She's having a problem staying pregnant because you've had miscarriages. There's got to be something here.
There aren't fibroids. You've had horrific periods since you were 11. There's something else. Let's look deeper into this.
Yeah, and the fact that they don't do that, and I think for like women's reproductive health, the way that we have to literally go in demanding these things, it's making me question that why in the year 2020, this is still something that's not spoken about. This is, and no disrespect to any of the emerging countries, but we're not in emerging countries here. I'm talking about London, England,
right?
Talking about the US,
right?
And doctors are not saying, okay, we're not finding it through what the issue is. So there's other things we can try and explore to see, because you see my medical record, seeing that hello. I as a teenager, every 6 months I was on iron treatments because I was constantly always anemic. So nobody ever looked into what is the cause of this?
Let's figure out why.
Yeah. So you saying that if you didn't go on that particular journey, you would never know is just, I shouldn't be surprised, but yet I still am.
Well, listen to this. So this reminds me of your situation. So I had a pretty scary labor and delivery with my daughter and with my son, because I basically forced my body into getting pregnant and had everything under the sun. So after my daughter, she was in the NICU for 6 days. We brought her home and I felt so ill. I had a really, really high fever. And I called my doc, my OB, and he kept saying, well, what is it that's giving you a fever? And I said, I don't know. I'm a new mom. I just brought my daughter home, who I haven't even cared for yet because nurses were caring for them. And now I'm sick. Turned into this whole thing. I go to the ER, and luckily my mom is like, I mean, she is like a pit bull. Like she does not mess around. So she's my advocate. So she goes with me, and they're trying to tell me what's wrong. Basically that nothing's wrong. And I don't know what normal bleeding is after having a baby. I had never had a baby. I'm hemorrhaging, and I have a high fever, and no one can figure out why. And they're about to send me home, and my mom's like, we need another opinion. Luckily, a resident came and said, you may have retained placenta. You may still have placenta left. Sure enough, they do an ultrasound. I had retained placenta. They do it. So I stayed overnight. They did a DNC. My placenta grew into my uterine lining. Oh, I'm sorry. You still there?
Yeah.
Sorry. My placenta had grown into my uterine lining. Put all of this in my medical record. Okay. Fast forward to last year, I have my son, my second. Same thing happens again. It went on for 6 weeks. ER, back and forth, back and forth. No, you had a C-section. You can't have it. We wouldn't have missed it.
Mind officially blown.
6 weeks, finally hemorrhaged in front of a doctor. And they sent me. I had retained placenta for 6 weeks after doctors told me, no, you don't. And refused to look. So you talk about having to be your own advocate and it being mind-blowing. It almost makes you feel like you're crazy because no one's believing you, or no one, and you have these professionals telling you, well, it's not fibroids, you're okay. Or, just deal with it. And for me, it's like, well, you're just hemorrhaging. Just here's another birth control. Try this, I know.
Sorry, Heather. I'm still stuck at the part of refuse to look. I did hear what you said after that.
Yeah, I know. No, but
like refuse.
I actually, the third ER trip, when I was home, and I said, I feel the same way. I feel open. I'm telling you, there's something wrong. And they said they saw something in an ultrasound, but they weren't sure what it was. So they were just going to rule it out as it was not placenta for whatever reason. And I remember one of the doctors asked me if I had psychological help.
Wait, what? Sorry.
Do you have anyone that you can talk to? And I was like, please, somebody listen to me. I know something's wrong.
And something, these doctors, and not all doctors are bad. They're not. No. But the doctors it's like, it makes me wonder if that's how you're speaking to people. Why are you a doctor? Why are you a doctor? You don't want to look. You don't want to explain. You don't want to listen. You just want to say, oh, do you have psychological help? Do you need to? I don't understand. I really do not understand how we are still dealing with these issues of doctors. And they're always saying that the resources are overstretched and whatever, but that doesn't mean you can't be good and thorough. You can still be thorough even if you're stretched.
I know. And what's funny is the second time around, a nurse, I think she was a resident. She was training, went back in my medical record and brought me on a Post-it with the all of my information about my placenta, because doctors had said, there's nothing in your charts about it. She said, I just had to dig a little deeper. It was in there. And that's exactly it. You can't get so comfortable with being a doctor that you just, well, it's not fibroids. Well, you're just after having a baby. You can't, it just shouldn't be happening. And you shouldn't have to be your own advocate to that level either, where you're demanding something,
And then to be like, why do you want it?
Right.
It's like, listen, I'm not asking you for crack.
Right. I'm asking you for a test, which I pay insurance for.
Right.
Right.
Anybody would think I was asking him for some illegal, illicit.
I know. Well,
something.
that's what I've been saying. Why do you think I would want another DNC? I want to be at home, like with my newborn. You know, why would I want to be here? What am I getting out of this?
Right, exactly.
You know?
Why would I want to be under general anesthetic with you cutting my belly open? Dude.
Right. I know.
It's
wild. You know, I've heard so many horror stories like this too. I mean, we're not the only ones, you know? I know.
But yet, last, so you had your baby boy 2019.
Yeah, May 2019.
Oh, bless his heart.
Yeah.
So, you know, so 2019, and that is still what's being faced. And it's, and so now I can understand why some people don't want to go to a doctor or seek any kind of help when they are going through this, especially those women that go through miscarriages or have gone through some kind of infertility and they feel something's wrong, but they're not being listened to, and they're literally just almost being treated like the silly little woman, go home.
And I think that's the problem, is that I think you're right when it comes to the female reproductive system. For some reason, it's somehow it can be linked to being our fault in a way. At least that's how it made me feel. I don't know if it made you feel that way at all. But like, well, what did you do for this to happen? Or it's just a bizarre way of thinking about it or handling it as a doctor. You know, you think you'd be extra sensitive.
Wow.
But even to say to you, so nonchalant, well, you either have really bad periods or you have a hysterectomy.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I guess I'll have bad periods. I mean, right.
Yeah, he wasn't my doctor for much. In fact,
No.
I just kind of think if I even saw him again after that, I don't think I did, because I just thought, no, I'm good, thanks though.
Yeah, I'm set. Yeah.
Because I have to kind of pay to be spoken to like that. Because I'm one of these people that if I'm paying for something, and I say to people, I'm like, listen, when I have to go to work, and those people are dancing on the one nerve I've got left. And I've got to go through all of that to make some money to come and spend it with you, and you're going to treat me like that. Guess what's not going to happen? You're not going to get my money. And that is really, because I'm just thinking sometimes when you have to go to work and you have to deal with certain characters and people, and then that hard-earned money,
yes,
that you have to take to be for somebody to speak to you like that's like. Yeah, as a good friend of mine would say, yeah, but no.
Yeah, nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, but no.
Yeah, but no. Okay, I'm good, thanks though. And it's just so, it is a challenge and it is a struggle. And I'm just so happy for women like yourself, Heather, that's not afraid to have those difficult conversations, to say, because when you started writing it, until these women started to come to you, you probably thought that you were alone in this.
Yeah. Well, because I think exactly, to circle back to what you said, it's my body. I'm a woman. This is what my body is supposed to be doing. So you almost feel ashamed of it. And meanwhile, look at this huge community of women who have dealt with it.
Wow.
You know?
And now you have two beautiful, beautiful babies, a little girl and a little boy.
Yes. Mickey's 3 and Ozzy is 1.
Wow. So it just goes to show that you just persevered, you pushed through, and you came through.
We did. And you know what? I think what was important is that I want, it's interesting. Like I think about all the failed attempts, and those 2 kids I have are like, to me, it's like, I can't picture anybody else. So it needed to be them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it worked out. And you know what? And if we wouldn't have had, if it would have been unsuccessful, I don't doubt that I would have had a different purpose.
Yeah,
you know?
Absolutely. Because it's funny, because thinking about it and you saying that, it just come to me that not everybody is supposed to be a biological parent.
No.
And again, some through choice because they don't want to be,
Mm-hmm.
but some in, like, for example, like myself, where that is the path and the journey of my life. And I can do one of two things. I can fold and buckle under it. And I remember someone that I used to work with, she was having fertility issues, and she ended up adopting.
Mm-hmm.
But where her epiphany came was they were trying and trying, and somebody said, what is it? Do you actually want to be pregnant, or do you want to be a mother?
Oh.
Yeah.
Wow.
And she said, when the person said that to her, it was just like, wait a minute.
Wow. I want to be a mom.
Right.
Right.
It's not the whole process, wonderful, great. But it's the fact that,
sorry.
that's okay. And but what she was saying is the goal was, because it wasn't to just be pregnant, it was to be a mother.
Right.
So she went down the adoption route and has 2 amazing children. Some of the stories that she tells of her youngest are absolutely hilarious. I keep saying to them that they actually should have reality TV in their home.
Because it's that good.
It's absolutely just, and then when she's saying like the interactions between them, it's absolutely hilarious. And if you actually look at them, you would just by looking, you would never know.
Mm-hmm.
Never know. And she is an amazing mother to these 2 children. She's had them both since they were little.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you're saying about your purpose,
not
all of us are going to be a mother through the natural means. But we all have a purpose.
100%. And if you end up not, being a biological mom, that doesn't make you any less of a mother. If you go through infertility, it doesn't. If you've gone through miscarriages, it doesn't. It doesn't. That's not what defines any of us as a person. Everybody has a purpose. It doesn't make it easier to go through any of it. But, we all have, look what you're doing. This is going to touch a lot of people,
Yes, that is the goal. That is the prayer, that it does touch, because I don't want to just be doing these just for doing them sake. Because to be honest with you, being in front of the camera for me is very nerve-wracking.
You seem really good at it.
I actually just like, oh my God, just like, this is not my comfort zone at all.
Really?
Believe me.
Well, you could have that. Go.
Thank you. But then somebody said to me many years ago, she said, I firmly believe that everything we go through in life is not for us, it's to help someone else.
Wow. And doesn't that, as someone who wants to help other people, and how you always say you're the go-to person, that like almost makes it easier to handle things, because you're like, you know what I mean?
Yes, absolutely. And so your journey, without you even realizing, has helped so many people, those that have reached out to you. And I think when we spoke last week, those that there's probably more that haven't reached out to you than have. So you may never know that the impact that you are leaving on this earth.
That makes me want to cry.
Because honestly, if it wasn't for me doing the podcasts, I would never have reached out to you.
Right.
But yet I'm a person that you have reached. So Heather, all I can say is just keep pushing on, just keep writing, just because you have such an amazing purpose as a mother, as a wife, as a business owner as well. So your journey and your story is nothing short of incredible and remarkable. And the fact that you've gone through all of that, still looking as fabulous as you do, it's like okay.
I don't like that, but thank you.
Okay, Heather, Miss Heather, I see you. Okay.
I used a flat iron in my hair today for the first time in months for you.
Oh, thank you.
I was like, oh my gosh, this is what it looks like when my hair is done.
Well, look, beautifully fabulous. Heather, thank you so much for
Thank you
your
so much.
openness, your transparency. And if I can just encourage you to just please keep writing. The world needs Heather.
I want you to know how inspiring you are. And thank you for reaching out to me. And I have been kind of in a funk and not been writing, and you are 100% inspiring me to get back on it. So thank you very, very much.
You are so welcome, Heather. Blessings to you. And stay in touch.
I will for sure.
Let me know how you're getting on.
Same. And if you ever, we'll have to get together.
Absolutely, Heather. All righty. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Allison.
You're welcome. Take care now. Bye-bye.